So far as the examiner tells you that the material cost is 2% waste, then that means you have to multiply the material cost by 100 over 98. If they are to tell you that the waste is 3%, you multiply by 100 over 97. If they tell you that the waste is 5%, you multiply by 100 over 95. But we said that labor cost valuation, prepare yourself what? So prepare for learning curve theory. Prepare for learning curve theory. Prepare for learning curve theory, right? Prepare for learning curve theory on the day of exam. Overhead valuation, you are to prepare for either absorption costing or activity-based costing. Marginal costing is not in your syllabus, and do not worry yourself for that. So when it comes to labor cost calculation, the examiner can bring in issues of learning curve theory. Be ready for him. As yesterday, we went through a CAMCO question. You look at how the examiner actually looked at the hours, total hours of the 50,000 units, which was partly first 100 and partly 49,900, right? So those bits and pieces were explained. Good. So we are not looking at that, but we are just trying to say that because this document with 26 pages comprises solely on issues of activity-based costing, we are to let you know that activity-based cost absorption costing came because of the valuation of overhead. So how do we use absorption costing in the valuation of overhead? So we talked about these bits last time, right? But just a reminder, using absorption costing, using absorption costing in the valuation of overheads, the valuation of overheads, using absorption costing, the valuation of overheads. What do? So step one, it says step one, you determine, if you remember, I allow some students to talk about it. Determine the total production overhead. So the last time talking about this bit, I'm not going to solve question and activity-based costing, absorption costing anymore. That is why I'm picking up this. There is no need for us to waste our time to be solving easy questions like this, right? So determine the total production overhead cost. So the last time for me, total production overhead cost, there's already a recorded lecture. This gadget code question, I'm not going to solve it because I've already solved it in a recorded lecture. So I'm not going to look at that, right? So step two, what do? If you have not watched it, please, you are not helping yourself and there's no time for you. Determine the total basis of absorption. Some people are still sleeping, continue to sleep, right? To determine the total production overhead, total basis of absorption, sorry. Total basis of absorption, basis of absorption. So I just get confused why the student should still be sleeping, right? Just like that. Calculate the overhead absorption rate, and the overhead absorption rate, that is what we call OAR, overhead absorption rate. Then step four, what do? You absorb the overheads into cost per unit of a product. Now, how do you do the absorption? We said doing the absorption is the OAR times the OAR, make it caps, OAR times the basis of absorption. Basis of absorption. OAR over basis of absorption, right? Now, that ends it for issues pertaining to what? Absorption costing. We will now go to activity-based costing in the same perspective, right? The same perspective. Just give me a moment, I'll write over here, then I'll clean it. So step one, if it is activity-based costing, so using ABC in valuing overheads, What are the steps, right? Using ABC in valuing overheads, Step one, determine the cost pools. And we say cost pools are activities that create what? Cost. And they are all the time denominated in monetary values. Determine the cost drivers. Three, calculate each cost driver rate. Here it calculates a lot of cost driver rates. How do you calculate it? It is the cost driver rate is calculated as the cost pool over the cost driver, right? And 4 you what? Absorb. So absorb into cost per unit of a product. Absorb into cost per unit of a product. So these are the steps in valuation of overheads using activity-based costing. That is the step. And these are the steps in the valuation of overheads using absorption costing. No student can ever be good in valuation of overheads using activity-based cost absorption costing if he or she does not know the steps. So if you really want to be good, please know the steps. I've stated clearly that in passing performance management, you really have to master and know your staffs, not a shallow understanding. It should be a detailed understanding. So do not take things on the face value. Those of you who are thinking that passing is just like butter and bread, please, it's not like that, right? Whoever passes performance management paper is having what? Higher chances, 99.99% of chattering. So for me, if a student passes PM, I actually say that this person has chatted. In fact, in my head, you have chatted. That is it. I know why I'm talking about this. You know for sure that there are a lot of experience that we have in teaching the ACC, right? So if you talk in that perspective, please, you should know why we are talking about that. This question has already been recorded, Gadget Co. So I'm not going to record that lecture. Honestly, I'm not going to record that lecture. The students have to go online and have a view of that question with a solution. Though in this manual, there's still a solution, but you still have to what? Go through the recorded lecture and still be fine. I am moving you straight. So that is page number 5. Let me just check it up. Is it page number 5? These are past questions, right? But notwithstanding, it's still important for you to be in good shape with that. So please, these are questions for you. These are questions for you. 26 pages. 26 pages. So you can see questions, answers. These are past questions, but they are all strictly on activity-based costing and absorption costing. They are beautiful questions, and please, if you have gone through this bit and you are fine, you can really say, I'm good with ABC, AC, examiner, forget it. I'm not going to learn that bit anymore. I think I'm okay, right? So I'm moving you through a question, right? The perspective of how to calculate is still the same. So I come straight away to this type of question. Triple Limited makes 3 types of gold watch. So I'm reading, right? So let's read the requirement first. Henry, all the time advise us the requirement first. Why you're not doing that? So the requirement first, so that at least you know what we are actually going to do, right? So here the requirement says, calculate requirement A, calculate the cost per unit. Now, we do not use absorption cost and activity-based costing to calculate overall cost, because we cannot use absorption costing to calculate material cost and labor cost, but we can only use to calculate overhead what? Cost. So this cost per unit the examiner is asking you to calculate, it is only the overhead portion of the overall cost, which you use the principles of activity-based costing and absorption costing in determine that cost. That is the overhead cost. But the direct material cost and the direct labor cost, if we don't use activity-based costing or absorption costing to determine that, it is already given. Good. That is an important point. Please take note of that. So the first is saying that calculate the cost per unit for each product using traditional methods. What is that traditional method? A traditional method of valuing overhead is either marginal costing or absorption costing. And the modern method of valuing overhead is what you call activity-based costing. But you know for sure that in the PM syllabus, we do not have marginal costing. So when the examiner talks about using traditional method, he's strictly talking about absorption costing. So calculate the cost per unit of each product using traditional methods, absorbing overheads on the basis of machine hours. And we stated clearly that all the time, absorption costing and marginal costing tend to look at either machine hours or labor hours as a basis of absorption. Good. So that is why the examiner said traditional. So you have to use absorption costing. Here, not marginal costing, because marginal costing is not in the PM syllabus. Do not worry yourself with that. You are not an F2 student. Then we come to calculate the cost per unit for each product using ABC. Can we use ABC to calculate the cost per unit? No, we can only use it to calculate an overhead cost, which is a section of the cost per unit. So you can use the ABC to calculate overhead cost per unit, which is a section of the overall cost of the product per unit. So we do not use ABC to determine material cost, labor cost. We only use it for the what? Overhead cost. Let's move on. C, explain why cost per unit. Explain why cost per unit calculated under ABC are often very different to cost per unit calculated under more traditional methods. What do you call more traditional methods? We are talking about absorption costing. And all the time, it is good to be what? Different, because they all have different assumptions. One believes in cost per cost driver, one believes in what? Total production overhead and total base of absorption. One believes in the perspective that let's calculate only one overhead absorption rate, which is a meter we use in charging overheads. One has that perspective that in fact, no matter your sizes, whether being fat, small, slim, or whatever, you are still the same individuals. And that let's treat all of you as one, calculate only one overhead absorption rate. Whether you are a Fanti or you are a Zima or a Ashanti, you are a human being. So let's consider that. Let's calculate only one overhead absorption rate. But activity-based costing says no, they are different. An Ashanti is different from what a Fanti, and it's different from a Votarian. So let's treat them separately. So activity-based costing calculates each and every cost pool and its cost driver. It's what? Cost driver rate. It doesn't look at calculating 1 meter and using to absorb for what? The different characteristics of overheads. Right. So those are the sort of issues that you can talk about. Another thing you can talk about here is that with the traditional methods, the volume of production influences the overhead charge. It influences the overhead charge. Then we come to the last perspective, which is part D. Part D, discuss the implications of a switch to ABC on pricing and profitability. So what is the impact of using activity-based costing on pricing of the product and profitability of the product? We should see a student come out with a whole answer talking about implications of ABC on pricing. So the impact of ABC on pricing, that is should be what? The first one. Impact of ABC on pricing. First one, so you write, right? You are sure that you give more information. That is to help you get a 6 marks. Impact of using ABC, you look at how I'm making the solution simple. ABC on profitability, So if I'm able to do this, I get what? If the examiner gives me 3 marks here, right? By giving 3 points, and the examiner gives me 3 marks over here because I've given 3 points, I score 6 marks for that theory. Over here, 4 marks, at least I can give my 4 points and also get my 4 marks. So at the end of the day, before doing the calculation, I've gotten 10 marks. I've gotten 10 marks. And I'm not going to let the examiner go scot-free. When it comes to the theory, I'm going to die with you. And I'm going to type very fast. That is why in the learning stage, please do not all the time be interested in writing book. Sometimes the question that you have solved already, we have solved already in class. If you are resolving it, please try and put your answer in an Excel and try to be putting all the formulas in the Excel sheet and do not be touching your calculator. Right, that is it. Let's make a move. So we look at the first perspective. Now, before we move into the solution, let's read the question, right? They are saying we should use, first of all, absorption costing. Second, we are to use activity-based costing. Can we move quickly? Triple Limited makes 3 types of gold watch: the Diva, the Classic, and the Poser. A traditional product costing system is used at present. So at the moment they use a traditional costing system, that is absorption costing. Although an activity-based costing system is being considered. It's being considered. Have they considered it? Yes, it's being considered. Details of the 3 products for a typical period are, so we have hours per unit, labor hours, machine hours, material cost per unit. Oh, the examiner has given material cost per unit. Then you're in good shape, right? They have given material cost per unit. You will not calculate it. The examiner has given material cost per unit. So in my solution, what I need to do is that the examiner said we should calculate. So the A part of the answer, so using absorption costing. Using what? Absorption costing. Using absorption costing. If I'm using absorption costing to calculate the cost, what product do I have? I have product D, So I'll just come, put that D. I move on, put a C. And lastly, put that what? P. Case closed. I start with the solution. So I'm solving it straight away, right? So material cost, that is what I know first. So I'll put it that. Material cost. Material cost under D, they say per unit. There's how says you calculate per unit. So the material cost already per unit. You can pick it up, right? So it's 20, no calculation, right? Material cost per unit for C, no calculation, 12. And that for P, 25. Case closed. Then I come, labor cost. Do I have the labor cost? Oh, at the moment, I do not see any labor cost. The examiner has only given me hours worked. Check it out. The examiner has only given me hours worked. Hours machine, sorry, labor hours. They have given me the hours worked by labor. So if I know the rate per hour, right? These are hours per, that is what? The time per hour. If I know the cost per hour, I can multiply to get the labor cost. So I've already indicated long time. Even yesterday talked about that in calculating labor cost. Labor cost is calculated as hours worked, hours worked times rate per hour. Hours worked times rate per hour. So we already know the hours per this question. We already know the hours worked by labor. We know the hours labor has worked. In the case of product D, is what half. In the case of product C, is 1.5. In the case of product P, 1. So I can go straight into the question. Question, where is labor cost per hour? If I get labor cost per hour, I can come and multiply, right? So let me move in. I'm not seeing any labor cost, but let me go down a little bit if it is there, right? So what is the examiner saying over here? The examiner has brought that bit here. He's saying that direct labor costs $6 per hour. Enough is enough for me, please. They are saying $6 per hour, so I can calculate. In the case of product D, right? Product D in calculating product D labor cost. How many hours for product D is half? What is half? Half is the same as 0.5, right? So half times 6. It's in dollars, so 6. So that gives us what? 3. Case close. Then in the case of product C, please, on the day of exam, you put this in your formula, right? That is 1.5. 1.5 is the same as 1.5, right? So times $6. So that gives me what? 9. In the case of product P, we have hours is what? 1 hour. They are working 1 hour as highlighted in yellow. So that is times what value? The rate is what? $6. So at the end of the day, we end up getting an answer to what? 6. Okay, so if you have them, then please you slot them. Labor cost, no calculation. You just multiply the hours worked by labor times the rate per hour. Case closed. So there's no wahala. 3 here, you get what? 9. The next one, you get what? 6. If it is Excel I'm using, there's no need to do the working somewhere and come and post. It's a waste of time. I just have to input my formula in the cell. Then straight away, the answer appears. If does anyone want to know how I calculated it, let him click on the cell. Then we come to the next item, which is overhead, which we are yet to what? Calculate that. But I saw something in the question, right? I saw something in here. What is happening over here is that the examiner is saying that the overhead absorption rate. Where do we talk about overhead absorption rate? Under absorption costing. You remember step 1, you determine the total production overhead. Step 2, you determine the basis of absorption. Then step 3, calculate the overhead absorption rate. What happened here is that the examiner has released you from stress. He has calculated the overhead absorption rate and he has given to you as 20. So you just have to move on from step 3 to step 4 by absorbing straight away. And this is the side where I say that students will now be looking at, they were saying step 1, determine total production overhead, and they are looking for it in the question. Please, it's a waste of time. That means you are not solid with what you learned. You are not solid with what you learned. The examiner has given you the overhead absorption rate. So you just have to move. So that means step 1, step 2 has been catered for. Step 3 has been catered for. So you just have to pick that step 3, which is the overhead absorption rate they have given to you, and go and calculate step 4. And you are now thinking of step 1. That shows that you didn't really understand what you studied. So the examiner has given the overhead absorption rate, so I can just also move in quickly and put that, right? On the day of exam, so the overhead calculation. So the overhead calculation, in the case of product D, no cause for alarm, easy to do. They said it's $28, right? So the meter is $28. Then I'll look at the base of absorption and multiply by it, right? In the case of product C, still $28. So the same thing will I do here, right? Then I'm looking for the other element to multiply. In the case of product P, still what? The emitter is what? $20, which is ready to charge. $28 ready to charge that. Now, in absorption costing, we are absorbing it on the basis of what? The examiner will tell you either machine hours or labor hours. Let's get there. They say that direct labor cost are $6 per hour and production overheads are absorbed on a machine hour basis. So the examiner has told you. And if you look at this side, he said that at this point in time, look at what he said. He said that the overhead absorption rate for the period is $28 per what? Machine hour. Per what? Machine hour. So the base of absorption is machine hour. So use the 28 to multiply the hours. So machine hour, we have them be here. We have 1.5, we have 1 and 3. Easy to do. Easy to do, right? Good. So here, I'll come here, multiply by 1.5 means 1.5. 1.5. Then here, I multiply by 1. And the last, I multiply by what? 3. But 1.5 times that will give me 1456. So like 70, I think so. Stand to be corrected. If you can do the calculation, please, you can get back if that is not it. I think 56 plus 14. Sorry, supposed to be rather, made a mistake. Supposed to be 28 plus 14. That will be 42, right? And here, 28, 28, 56, 28, that gives you 84, right? Stand to be corrected, but I think that is it. So they are all per unit. In the case of product D, it is 42. In the case of product C, it is what? 28. In the case of product P, it is 84. So I have the overall cost. So what do? I'm now going to underline and estimate that. So examiner, this is an easy peasy for me because you have actually made my life even simple. The overall absorption rate, instead of you allowing me to calculate, you said no, I shouldn't calculate, right? So that's a good job for me. Thank you very much. Total cost per unit. Total cost per unit. How do you get that? Total cost per unit here, you're going to be 20 plus 3. That is 65, right? Here's 65. Over here, that will give us 49. And over the last one, 84 plus 6 is going to give us 90, and 90 plus 25, 115. I stand to be corrected with my figures, please. You can go through. So that ends it for the A part of the question, the first requirement. The first requirement was saying we should do what? Let's go to that point. The first requirement was saying that calculate the cost. Calculate the cost per unit for each product using traditional absorption. That is what? Absorbing overhead on the basis of machine hours. And that is absorption costing. We have gone through that. Let's check what the examiner did. The examiner got it perfectly. It's a good job by the examiner. He also got it perfectly, 65. The next one, he got what? 49. And the last bit, examiner beautifully got 115. 115. That ends it. Then we are supposed to use the activity-based costing. Let me walk you through. I think it's left in 4 minutes. If it should end, please, you have to zoom in again. So using activity-based costing, that is the B aspect of the question. Using activity-based costing to determine cost per unit. We now have to ask ourselves, what is the cost pool, right? So we said step 1, determine the cost pool. Let's go into the steps. If the meeting should end, please, you have to remote in again. So I think that was page number, what page was that? I think page 2. That was where we were. We're talking about the page 2. Activity-based costing, what is the first step? We said the first step is to determine the cost pools. The second step is to determine the cost drivers. The third step is to calculate the cost driver rate. The fourth step is to absorb using the meter into the cost per unit of a product. So that is where we are heading towards, right? So let's move in quickly. So in the case of the question, triple limited, we are finished with absorption cost, and activity-based costing is what we wanted to start with. And it is not a complicated. So using activity-based costing to determine the overhead cost, which is a portion of the cost per unit. So the first thing to do is to determine the total production overhead, or which is also called the cost pool. So the overall cost pool was given to us as 654,500. 654,500. That is what the examiner give us. And where can we see that 654,500? Let's go up there. I think there's some few meters above, right? The examiner has given us the total. He said that the total production overhead, which becomes the cost pool, and we say all cost pools are monetary values. Here it is 654,500, right? Good. So that is it. So we come to step 2. So first one is cost pool, right? So the first one is cost pool. So the cost pool in total, is 654. But you have the breakdown of that 654,500, right? The examiner gave it to us. Let's go and see where that information came from. Let's see the 654. Where are we getting it from? Sorry, the 654,500. The examiner has stated that the total, which is 654,500, the total production overhead is 654,500. But he's saying that 35% relates to what? Cost of setup. He's saying that 20% of that 654,500 is an overhead cost for machinery, and 15% for material handling, 30% for inspection. So the examiner decided not to give me the values, but I can determine the values over here. So 35%, right, times 35% times dollar 654,500. Then I get my figure, right? Because you said that the cost pool should be monetary values, but here they have given to us in percentage. We can't use the percentage, so we have to get the figure in what? Monetary values. So 654,500. The next bit, if the meeting should end, please you resume in again, then we move on, right? 15% times 654,500. And the last bit is to multiply 30% by 654,500. So if you do that, you get the respective answers, isn't it? So the first one here is to multiply 35%. 35%. So that gives you 0.35 times 654,500. That gives me 229,075. 229,075. 229,075. The next one, I can multiply 20% times that, right? So 0.2 times 654,500. That gives me 130,900. 130,900. Then I can move on to the next 15%.